Well, let's talk about today. Seems like Bones kind of had things as he's projecting for next Wednesday, including Nikolaj Ehlers, but still some relative uncertainty as to whether he's going to feel well enough to play in the game, which has to be concerning and probably frustrating to all parties involved.
Yeah, it's a situation where when Rick Bowness talks about Nikolaj Ehlers right now, you can tell he has empathy for what must be a frustrating situation for the player. The guy gets hurt, misses a substantial amount of the playoffs, has a rough ending to his season, and then starts this way. And it's not that he blocked a shot. It's not that he, stopped a scoring chance or any of those things that offer you a little bit of cachet in the NHL circle. It's that he had neck spasms while working out. And Bowness knows that he's at his best and Winnipeg's at his best if he's fully healthy all of the way. So he's got time for that. Bowness is being patient, but you have to also hear the undercurrent in that, gosh, it's getting frustrating. He wants to see his second line. He wants to see his power play units. He wants to see all those sorts of things. And Ehlers is unlikely to play tomorrow. So it certainly seems as though, he's made some plans, hasn't got to live them through. And frustration is boiling a little bit too with that one, I think.
And it's also problematic because they're trying to work in a young player playing center for the first time in the National Hockey League. And you know that Nikolaj Ehlers is going to be but potentially really the offensive catalyst on that line. What have you thought about Cole Perfetti's training camp overall and his play in the preseason games at center? And what do you make of Cole's situation going into Game 1 next week, likely without being able to play in any game action with Nick before the game in Calgary?
Yeah, Cole Perfetti has a challenge in front of him. And that would be true if he had been able to play in preseason games with Ehlers on his side, along with Nino Niederreiter. And it's definitely true given that they haven't been able to do that. I mean, the guy played center in the OHL for a large portion of his career there and excelled at it. I mean, in the final year of his draft year, I think he was in the top couple of players in the final half of his draft year. He's in the top couple of players in terms of point production. He really controlled the game. He goes to the Moose, starts as a wing, progressively moves more and more to center, and he develops an ability to control the offensive zone at center as well. So the guy has done it, but this is a harder job than he has ever had to do at any level because it's the NHL, it's inside the top six, and now he'll have to start the season, figuring out chemistry instead of having had all the preseason opportunity. I thought he's mostly looked good. That beautiful assist to Ville Heinola. I mean, everything about that play is what you hope for from Cole Perfetti as a center this year. His wingers did a great job to gain possession of the puck in the offensive zone, protecting it deep. That was Alex Iafallo and Nino Niederreiter. And that Niederreiter-Perfetti chemistry, I think, is building. I think that's a good thing that you've seen. They get him the puck in space, and then he uses his body. And he's not a big player. He's not a fast player, but he turns his hips away from the player that's defending him. He keeps the puck safe on his backhand. He reads the ice, and he feathers a beautiful pass to Ville Heinola for the goal. Everything about that is the sort of thing you're hoping for. Perfetti making these high IQ plays from the middle of the ice to players in dangerous situations, and his wingers are doing some of the heavy-duty work on the boards. Beautiful. He was also a step behind on a box out on a goal against, and he took a penalty that ended up leading to a goal against, so it stings maybe a little bit more. And I think that a reasonable expectation for Cole Perfetti this year is success at second-line center, because he'll have quality line mates, and he's a quality player himself, but with growing pains. There's no way around there being a shift, a sequence of shifts, maybe even a game or two from here, there, the other place that, look like a struggle for him. Winnipeg does not have Scheifele and Dubois down the middle. They don't have Scheifele and Stastny down the middle. They're breaking in a new player into that role, and that's going to come with some ups and downs, and I think he'll be all right as long as we manage expectations in a fair manner for him.
Speaking of the top six, while we're at it, it sounded like everyone was back on the ice. I mean, you mentioned you talked a little bit with Mark Scheifele. How are the guys feeling, and how are they looking on the ice, and their level of preparedness for this final preseason game, but most importantly, the start of the season?
Yeah, it was like the first time that I can remember, though camp is a bit of a blur already somehow, that it wasn't littered with non-contact jerseys. There were no non-contact jerseys, and that was an amazing sight to see. And then To have the full top line there, recovered from their illness, that's a good sign to see. I'm sure that yesterday's day off helped on all fronts. And then the guys that got a night off on Monday, I'm sure that was a big deal for them too. I did get to chat a little bit with Mark Scheifele for a story I'll have coming out in the next little while. Something I've been working on for a while, to be honest. I just wanted to top off, and it was a really fun, good chat with him. So I think spirits are good on that top line. And it was good to see them together as well. I really think Vilardi, Connor, and Scheifele think the game in similar ways, the types of reads that they make and the way that they break down the offensive zone. So, they have gotten some opportunity, not a lot to play together so far. As long as they can keep the game in the offensive zone, I think I'm going to be really excited. I think Jets fans will be really impressed by what they're able to do there.
Well, there is going to be a lot on the shoulders of that line, especially with the uncertainty about the about line 2. And I mean, just as far as practice goes, you mentioned there's no non-contact jerseys. The fact that Ehlers is out there in a full contact jersey practicing at full bore, but unlikely to play, I have to admit that's one of the more strange things that we've heard when it comes to player availability that I can remember in a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. And Nikolaj Ehlers has passed his medicals. He has been given medical clearance to play. He is practicing what looks like full bore to me, so I would support that as well. I mean, he fired an absolute laser beam, top glove, or actually top blocker, I think it was, on Connor Hellebuck. That just sort of had all of us going, whoa, where did that come from? And yet, he wakes up, each day, and he's got enough of that neck spasm ailment going still to decide that, he's not ready for game action. And that's a call that he's making. Only he knows his body. Only he knows what he feels like. I don't know if there's a difference between, like, if he takes a big hit, is that going to aggravate something in that sort of regard or not? I don't know that, but the official word is that it's him that's keeping himself out of the lineup out of a sense of precaution, as opposed to the medical clearance that he needs. I think that they've given him that already.
Murat, just finishing up on the forwards as we look ahead, how, given the way that it's set up right now, with the addition of Alex Iafallo onto the wing with Adam Lowry, how much of a difference maker do you think he will be in that role? And how much does that maybe increase the potential, the offensive potential of Adam Lowry's line compared to previous units?
Yeah, I think Alex Iafallo has grown on me every single day in camp. From early days, he's one of the early arrivals, even before camp was officially underway. And he was just, one of the veterans figuring things out. But it seems like every practice, every game, he's doing something that makes me think, oh, this is why his coaches loved him so much in Los Angeles. He's a smart player, a versatile player. He does have offensive ability as well. And we've seen with Adam Lowry, when he gets wingers that are of that quality, and you saw it with Nino Niederreiter at the end of last season, that line starts to cook a little bit. That line starts to be able to score and outscore its opposition. It's not just shut down, hope to win it 0-0. And I think that Iafallo on that line, assuming, Mason Appleton seems like he's got that job locked up. I wondered if Nemestikov might climb into it at some point. Doesn't seem to be the case. But Lowry's in a good situation to play with his best pair of wingers in ages. And I think that is very important if Winnipeg's going to roll 3 or 4 lines deep, if they're going to use Lowry as a matchup line, meaning he gets big minutes relative to, other third and fourth lines around the league. They've got to be able to produce. They have to. If they shut down other teams' players and it's, 0-0 or they're, -2 on the season at 5-on-5, I mean, that's great. If they can actually pop a goal now and again, like they started to do when it was Lowry and Niederreiter down the stretch, then you've got an advantage. That's what, in part, turned Winnipeg's season around and claimed that playoff spot and gave them a fighting chance, at least early, against Vegas. And I think that Winnipeg needs it very badly this season.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And Appleton starting on that line, I'm interested in your thoughts about how his situation might be a little different this year, just with the depth and how many other players they are fighting for spots. And certainly Vlad Nemestikov, I mean, that dude is plug and play pretty much everywhere in the lineup. I was thinking that they might go to Nemestikov at times playing with Lowry and Iafallo. What do you think Appleton needs to do to make sure that he's staying alongside Adam Lowry in a more prominent role than he might get on a fourth line?
Yeah, he's earned Rick Bowness's trust. You can tell that there is that trust between player and coach. And I think that there's some things working in Appleton's favor. One, he's played with Lowry for a few years now. I think one of the smartest things that he ever did was, it was a few camps ago, I think it was coming out of the pandemic, where he essentially stapled himself to Lowry's hip before, during, and after practice days, always doing workouts and things like that all on the ice, the drills that they would run for each other after. And I think that it's really built a familiarity and a trust there that has worked for him. Last season, one of the things that Bowness really praised was, can the winger get the puck moving out of his own zone when pressured along the boards? And Appleton's one of Winnipeg's few right-handed forwards, which helps in a certain degree getting the puck out of his own zone on the breakout. Bowness is concerned about Winnipeg's ability to break the puck out so far this preseason, and Appleton's willing to eat a hit in order to get that job done. So I think that trust, his handedness, and the fact that this one small aspect of the game that Bowness is worried about with respect to the full team is something he believes Appleton can do, I think that keeps him in that third line spot. Even if, I think that Nemestikov is the more impactful player. He's a lefty, and maybe there's less confidence in that, and maybe he wants, Rick Bowness wants Mason Appleton to seize that third line job. At least to the Jets' credit, there's multiple fourth liners now that you could imagine on third lines of Jets teams past. So Appleton had better, do the things that he needs to do to maintain his hold on the job.
Let's assume that it stays status quo. How much better should the Jets' fourth line be with Nemestikov and Morgan Barron, who played a lot along the third line last year, along with the newcomer Kupari? Maybe just thoughts on Kupari and what you've seen from him during his limited time here in Winnipeg so far.
I like Kupari's game so far. He's been quick. He's been engaged in the play. He gives you a sense, whether this translates into the regular season or not, that he might be able to create from the fourth line. And that definitely applies to Nemestikov, Morgan Barron as well. I mean, there are times last year when his physicality was helping the Jets really control the puck in the offensive zone. And a lot of Jets fourth lines of years past, you look at them and you look at their stat line at the end of the year and you're like, okay, well, I guess they were there, but they didn't put up points. And I recognize that's not all of their job. Bowness loves that they can do special teams, they're killing penalties, they're getting all those things done. But if you can't count, if that's the go get a coffee, go get go take a break line, when you're watching the game on TV, it's not enough. It's not enough to give Bowness the reason to play them anymore. And this year, it at least looks like they should be able to produce some goals for the Winnipeg Jets. That should give everybody a break if that trust is built and earned and they produce. And I'm curious to see how Winnipeg uses its depth, because it's a deeper team. It's a deeper team this year than it's been in ages, and that only holds true as long as those guys produce.
All right, Murat, let's get to the blue line. And we've all been talking about it. We've got a young, highly drafted Scandinavian defenseman. We're talking about his status, where he'll be. So what's the deal with Elias Salomonsson? We'll get to Ville in a minute, folks. We all thought that he was back to Sweden at the end of his camp. He's been assigned to the Moose. We were reading an article from Sweden yesterday that essentially says that this is, I don't know whether we want to call it a loophole, whether we want to call it, we weren't totally familiar with this new agreement with Sweden. He's on the Moose right now. Can he stay there? Will he stay there? Can you explain what you know about this and what the Jets' options are with Elias?
Yeah, it's been a surprise to me too to learn this over the last little while, and so I put that in the piece today. In short, Winnipeg has the option to keep Elias Salomonsson with the AHL Manitoba Moose this season. It's under their control, and that has been confirmed by his agent to me, and even chatted with some folks over in Sweden as well. The why to that, I'm still learning my way through it. I'm still wading my way through it. I don't feel like an expert in this topic at all. But the NHL has an agreement with the SHL in Sweden about the terms, about players that go from one league to another, who's eligible, why they're eligible. And my understanding with Salomonsson is based on the current rules. It has something to do with Winnipeg signing him straight away after the draft, before the July 15th deadline following his draft. And he's played a full season in Sweden since that time. And something about that seems to unlock a mechanism whereby Winnipeg can choose to play him in the AHL. Without that, well, then he'd have to go back to Sweden, and that's good for a Swedish club. They get to keep their young talent. There's reasons to appreciate that type of agreement. If they can, and they can, let's be clear about that, keep him with the Moose, there's a chance that Winnipeg's top defensive prospect plays for the Manitoba Moose this year. His name isn't Ville Heinola, and that makes that an even more exciting and dynamic team to watch.
Well, let's go from one top, highly drafted Scandinavian defense prospect to another that's been around longer. Ville has been probably the biggest topic on this program for the last couple of days. Have you seen his training camp as highly as most fans have? And we heard from Rick Bowness saying a lot was going to be determined from these last two games. From your perspective, Murat, what is at stake for Ville in this game tomorrow, and the likelihood of him, well, first off, starting on the roster to begin the season, and if he's on the roster, then in the lineup?
Let me go backwards. Zero chance he starts. I think it's a zero chance he starts inside that top six. Rick Bowness has complimented his game. We can all see that this is as close as he's ever been to, NHL level play in all three zones. I rate Heinola's camp well. I don't know if I rate it as well as the fan base, which has really been waiting for a player of Heinola's skill set and ability to make that leap and, have valid concerns about the way he's been developed, especially when he wasn't playing at all on the taxi squad, if we want to go back that far. So he's been a lightning rod of a player. He's come in and he's had a very good camp. This is this is the best camp that Ville Heinola has had as a Winnipeg Jet. He's shown what he can do in all three zones. He's defended against bigger players, which is something that he's not supposed to be able to do. He always seems to have a stick on puck, or, even if he's getting muscled around or pushed around in those board battles or what have you, Winnipeg has ended up with the puck more often than not. So when I watch it, it doesn't feel safe because he looks off balance and he looks like the other guy's stronger and, maybe about to get better position. But you count it all up and you're like, well, Winnipeg got the puck that time and that time, not that one. And then you go by the end of the night, his metrics look great. His actual level of battles won look good as well. And you're like, well, this guy, he certainly hasn't played himself off the team. The one thing that keeps him away, Rick Bowness saying today, in the scrum that I came from leading up into this chat, is that none of the veterans have played their way off the team. None of the players on last year's team have played their way off the team. And it seems to me that it's very much down to the wire as to whether he'll stay on that roster or not. I think he has earned it. It doesn't seem as though they're in a hurry to demote anybody to make room for him. If Schmidt is hurt and can't play, well, that's a different thing. Now there's an IR opening. Now you get to keep an extra guy. That would keep him around. I think the story is yet to be determined, but I think it's less than 50-50. He starts with the Jets despite his great play.
Interesting. It is all part of a bigger question, of which he's a big piece. How this team looks, are they keeping the 8 defensemen, and what are the moves they have to make to even get to that point? Declan Chisholm was kind of skating in. If you take from what we did from the reports of it, kind of looks like 9 of 9 when it comes to the defense depth chart right now. Couple of the chatters made a good point of, Bernard Docker, who had big numbers last year in the American Hockey League. I believe the number they quoted was 35 points in 41 games. Passed through waivers yesterday. Do you think that Winnipeg Jets take the chance that Declan Chisholm could be picked up if he's assigned to the Manitoba Moose? Bigger question is, what are the moves that you expect to be made before the 11th?
Yeah, I think it's possible they waive Declan Chisholm. Certainly, I really do. And, he's behind an awful lot of guys and, a little bit banged up from time to time throughout camp, hasn't always been able to show his maximum self. When he's gotten into the lineup, he's played well, particularly offensively. Defensively, I don't think he's there yet in terms of NHL ability. Could that come if they keep him around and just give him a few more reps and all of that sort of stuff? Certainly, I think it could come, but it hasn't been so explosive that they're going to risk, or that they would automatically have to risk a more established player for him. If Winnipeg is going to waive him, which I think is completely within the realm of possibility here, I wonder about the timing of it, because if a team claims him on waivers, they've got to keep him on the roster for a certain amount of time, right? And they've got to hold on to him. Right now, teams haven't cut all of the cuts that they're going to make at their camps. And I'm thinking that they still are looking at, their 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th guys at various camps around the league. It's almost easier to pass a guy through now than waiting until the last possible day. So I'm thinking, like with Jeffrey Viel, which just happened, that if that's coming, maybe it should come relatively soon. So I think that maybe the moves that I expect are that Logan Stanley and Kyle Capobianco get kept, that Declan Chisholm gets waived, and Heinola goes down unless an IR spot opens up an opportunity for him as well, which is kind of boringly just like how you would have drawn it up in August if you thought it through.
Okay, you know what? Terrible example. We mixed it up. It was 35 penalty minutes. So maybe the Bernard Docker comparison to Chisholm that I just made, scratch that from the record, everybody. Erase that. But to your point, though, Murat, and I think this is what the Jets were trying to do last year with Johnny Kovacevic. I mean, you make those moves at a time where the other 31 teams are all squeezing their heads going, okay, how do we take care of just what we have right now? I mean, there won't be a ton of markets that guy is definitely on the club, but it only takes one, and that is, the danger of, exposing a player that I think they would be similar to last year when they lost Johnny. It'd be really unfortunate to lose a player like that that's shown what he has so far with the organization without ever really getting a chance to show what he can do at the NHL level.
Yeah, it's just a sad story. That would be it. It wouldn't be a disastrous story. You'd feel happy for the guy. He got an NHL opportunity somewhere. That would be good for him. Just like Jansen Arkin's getting claimed by Pittsburgh right now. Well, good for him. Let's see if they keep him up there and what he can do. That would be a positive story for the human being. He's become an NHL player, and that's what waivers is meant to do, to stop teams from being able to hoard talent that could be NHL capable in other places. So that would be the system working in a way. But from the Winnipeg Jets perspective, you drafted the guy, you developed him, you watched his junior career play out, you brought him onto the Moose, you've watched him excel for you at the Moose level, and then what? And then you lose him for nothing because another team happened to have a need there. I guess that's part of the inefficiency that comes with the system, but it would just have to burn. If they lost two guys like that in consecutive seasons, it would just be frustrating for them, I think. And at some point too, if you really want to follow it all of the way to the nth degree, and I'm not really advocating for this, but why have scouts? Why have scouts and why have development if your second, third, fourth, fifth rounders have to go through that sort of rigmarole years later and you don't end up promoting them to the team because you signed or you picked up a Kyle Capobianco type, because there are that many good quality NHL players or NHL cusp players available. Maybe it really just is about the first rounders. Maybe you don't need a development program and to spend all that money in terms of advantages for the Moose and things like that. I'm just saying that. I don't believe that. I don't think that's the way that a team should go. But as the sort of question you start asking,
especially a quote unquote draft and develop team that has always been the mantra of this club. They're going to draft well. They're going to develop them with their club, and they're going to get them ready and, hopefully turn them into NHL players. And part of that would be playing at some point in the NHL with the club and seeing whether they can cut it and where they are at. What is the likelihood of a trade involving any member of the defense before next week, do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not hearing anything about it, but that doesn't mean that that it's not being discussed in some way, shape, or form. The Jets are in a perfect spot to consider making a trade, I think. They have, if you assume Capobianco and Stanley are your 7 and your 8, and if they're both healthy, and if the Jets, would prefer them and the NHL to Declan Chisholm and Ville Heinola, then you might feel like the Jets have an excess there. And if teams are willing to spend any amount of assets on those players, then maybe you do pick up an extra pick. Maybe it's a way to get something back from this position instead of losing somebody on waivers for nothing. It would make sense. I think if some team out there were willing to offer the Jets, a really substantial thing for some of the veterans like Schmidt or Pionk, like fans often ask for, that would maybe be a ship that has sailed. I'm not sure. But anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say is it would make sense to me if something happened. I'm not hearing anything as front burner, and it might just be status quo all over again.
Yeah, listen, I've been sort of highly skeptical. And listen, I'm a lot more optimistic about Neil Pionk's ability to kind of bounce back next season, be more like the guy that, we saw in the playoffs and the guy that we saw, a couple seasons ago before going through his tough time. And I think that if he does that, that will be a huge boost to the club. But considering his last couple seasons and his salary and Nate Schmidt's salary, I don't think it would be any big package. I would be surprised if there was a team that was just even able to take on that salary, Murat, even if they had a high opinion of the player and thought they could come in. It probably would in some ways be money in, money out on what that does to you. But one way or the other, I don't think there's an argument that a trade just to loosen it up with one of those players to give a little bit more of a path for the young guys to come in would be a good thing for the Winnipeg Jets. But it's not like we're seeing a flurry of activity all around the league and the Jets are the only ones that's quiet. This is a situation that's unique, and we know it's bottom line. It's hard to trade veteran players that are making that much money with term on their contract.
Yeah, we're on the precipice of exiting the flat cap era of the NHL, but and it hasn't been 100% flat. It's increased a little bit, but I think that pandemic economics still play a little bit of a role here in terms of an overwhelming percentage of cap space around the league has been eaten up. And now everybody's favorite cap broker, the Arizona Coyotes, seem like they're actually trying to, trying to compete and things like that. I don't think that it would be easy for a team to trade a veteran with a lot of money and term on their contract at this stage. I also think that we've seen, like, Neil Pionk is a really fascinating example, and I wrote a little bit about that in the piece today. But Winnipeg has seen him deliver top 4 quality results. So it would have a reason to believe he can do it again. It's been a couple years. Like, you can go through most of the last 2 seasons and really question whether he can win those top 4 matchups. He did it for small stretches, including down the stretch. And, he was Winnipeg's leader in a lot of ways on the blue line once Josh Morrissey came out of the lineup. So there's enough there that you wonder, I would at least understand a bit of patience on Winnipeg's part. I know fans are running out of patience. I know if Pionk has a really miserable year this year, I might speak a different tune. But we saw Josh Morrissey have 2 very subpar seasons for his ability level. We saw Adam Lowry a couple years ago when his dad was coach that season, take a step back and then, take a modest step forward again last year and things like that. Sometimes players' performance goes up and down and they get soured on a little bit. And then you find out that there was some reason why something that seems to explain it all, and they return to a previous level of performance. If he doesn't play that well, then playing him 22 minutes a night like the Jets did last year, that would be a mistake. But at least, even if it seems like I've had too much patience on this front, I still have that for a player in Neil Pionk's situation, especially with the market being what it would be.
Just before we go, we haven't talked a lot about the battle for the 13th forward, if you will. What have you thought about Parker Ford throughout, who, I'll be honest, I don't think was on many people's radars about still being around at this point of training camp. But especially after a couple goals, although ironically, I think both assisted by Parker Ford, is David Gustafsson the guy that has won that 13th forward job?
Yeah, I think the job is David Gustafsson's. And as I recall, Parker Ford can be sent to the Moose without needing waivers. That's a very easy decision from a keep all of your players perspective. I think it would be easy for Parker Ford to have a really hardworking, impactful start to his, continued start to his Moose career, and maybe be in that conversation for bottom six call-ups the same way that a Mikey Eyssimont was last year. He's a hardworking player. He's fun to watch. He can win battles against players much bigger than he is. It's been one of the more entertaining stories. And I go back to, I think it was March when he signed that Moose contract, and I texted a couple people in college, scouts, various guys, and the message was, this guy is a pain in the butt to play against. He never stops working. He's tireless. We circle his number on the board, or we believe that he's so hardworking. He could be a depth player at the NHL level as well. So there was some optimism in the circles that knew him well. And the question was, does he create enough to justify an NHL roster spot? At least through preseason, he has. Like he certainly has been in those moments. I still think, to Gustafsson's credit, that he's your best 13th forward option. He'll kill penalties. He's got the well-rounded game. And even on some of those Parker Ford assists, you rewind and David Gustafsson's made a nice defensive play to kick things off as well. So I think that's the right choice, and I think it's the choice Winnipeg will make.